Hey, and welcome to another episode of Back from the Future Mixtape Tuesdays, and I'll introduce you to my host.
Hello, future time travelers. I am Zelda, the world's first AI compliant YouTube presenter. I am hanging out with my boy Zain.
Right, now today we're going to be talking about a new codec that's been launched by Apple called ProRes Raw. Now, what is ProRes Raw? Now, normally if you're shooting in 4K, you're on your whatever video camera you're using, you've either got to use a proprietary codec that comes with the camera, or you're going to be recording RAW or Cinema DNG. Now, what Apple have done is they've brought out their own codec to use with their cameras, not with their cameras, but with your camera rather. Now, at the moment, there's no camera that records ProRes Raw natively apart from the DJI X7 that you would use with one of their drones. Now, Atomos have brought out their Shogun, Sumo, and I think their Ninja 4 recorders that are now ProRes Raw compliant, and there are cameras out there that can output a raw SDI feed that you can use with either the Shogun or the Sumo. And Zelda, if you could give us a list of those cameras.
Zain, here is a list of all the cameras that will give you a uncompressed 4K signal via the SDI socket. The first is the Canon C300 Mark II from Sony, FS7, FS7 Mark II, FS5. From Panasonic it's the EVA1, and last but not least, Vericam LT.
Right, now the thing about ProRes Raw is it comes in two flavors as well. There's ProRes Raw itself and ProRes HQ. Now, ProRes Raw has a larger file size than ProRes HQ. Now, also the other thing about ProRes is that it can go from 12-bit all the way up to 16-bit. I've even heard rumors that it can go even further if it was capable of recording it both from the camera or the recorder itself. Now, the thing is, with some of the recorders themselves, like the Shogun and the Sumo and so forth, they can record also with the ProRes Raw. They can record 120 frames 4K slow-mo, that is, and 240 frames in 2K. Now, the great thing about ProRes is its data rate is a lot lower than Cinema DNG or shooting totally uncompressed. We can look at the charts and see that if you're shooting 4K ProRes HQ, your data rate at 24 frames a second, your data rate is going to be between 80 to 140 megabytes a second. And if you're shooting ProRes Raw, it's only 40 to 100 megabytes a second. Now, why is there such a massive margin between, say, for example, 80 megs to 140 megs with the ProRes HQ, and 40 to 100 between with ProRes Raw? The reason for that is that if you're shooting in very low light, you're going to introduce a lot of noise, and the codec has to work harder, so it increases the bit rate. So it's variable bit rate essentially. So it's got to work a lot harder, so the data rate goes up. So if you want to keep your data rate as low as possible, make sure that it is well lit and it has plenty of amount of light to keep the data rate more manageable. The other thing about ProRes Raw and ProRes HQ is that the CPU overhead is a lot lower. Now I'll give you an example. I'll bring up a display. You can have up to 8 simultaneous 4K streams picture in picture. With ProRes HQ you can have 7. With Canon RAW you can have 3. And with Redcode RAW with a 5:1 compression you only get 1. Another thing worth remembering is when you've been given a job to do and you're out on the streets and you meet another cinematographer, if you ain't packing the right kind of codec and you start clipping the highlights and losing details in the shadows, you're going to end up in a lot of trouble. You're going to end up being letterboxed in, and that's not a nice feeling when it's done by a rival cinematographer. So these are things that you got to make sure that don't happen when you're out there. The other thing I wanted to say is at the moment ProRes Raw is only available with Final Cut Pro. So at the moment there's no information about it being exported to Windows. My guess is that Apple will milk the market with Final Cut Pro, and of course if you're using Final Cut Pro you've got to be tied into their hardware as well. So you know, business is business. They've created a option for people to use 4K with a very efficient codec, but you're tied into their ecosystem because of it. Now, which is a very good business idea, and I guess and hope everybody is, I guess, hoping that at some point they'll export it to Windows. There's also rumours that Blackmagic will hopefully be adopting the new ProRes Raw codec for their 4K line of cameras as well. And if that happened, that's also going to be good for everyone as well, people who've bought the cameras and people who are looking to buy their cameras as well. But nothing has been confirmed yet. It's something that Blackmagic Design are looking into. So that wraps it up for today's show. Zelda, if you could do the honours.
Thank you for watching today's show. If you enjoyed what you saw, you can smash the like button. Please subscribe, leave a comment. You can also join us on social media, Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.
And I'll see you in the future, if there is one.